In 1882, on the quiet hills of Hyde Park, New York, a child was born. A child raised in wealth and comfort, yet destined to face storms no fortune could conceal. His name was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Let us take a brief look at the lights and shadows of this influential man. His father, James Roosevelt, was a wealthy landowner, gentle, kind, but often ill and frail. His mother, Sarah Delano, strict and commanding, devoted all her attention to her only son. She taught Franklin discipline, confidence, and a sense of superiority. She instilled in him the belief that he must always be prepared to lead. Franklin grew up among green gardens and vast libraries. Family trips to Europe exposed him to other cultures. He learned French and German, and within him a whisper grew, "You were made for something great." Years later, at Harvard University, he studied history and glimpsed his future in the mirror of the past. Among students, he was well-dressed and charming, not a scholarly genius, but distinguished by his confidence and ability to connect with people. Law at Columbia felt lifeless, but politics burned like fire in his soul. In 1905, he married Eleanor Roosevelt, his distant cousin and niece of then-President Theodore Roosevelt. Eleanor was thoughtful and independent. Together they had 6 children, though one died in infancy. Franklin's rise in politics was swift. In 1910, he entered the New York State Senate and quickly drew attention. In 1913, President Woodrow Wilson appointed him Assistant Secretary of the Navy. With energy and vision, he modernized the fleet, gaining experience that would later serve him as Commander-in-Chief. But in the summer of 1921, fate struck hard at Campo Bello. Polio took his legs. Many thought it was the end. Yet with iron will, he rose again. He was rarely seen in public using a wheelchair, though he never walked unaided again. At Warm Springs, he built a center for polio patients, offering them hope. His illness, instead of defeating him, turned him into a symbol of resilience. In 1928, he became governor of New York. He brought reforms, gave farmers and workers hope. When the Great Depression shattered America in 1929, Roosevelt was ready to lead the nation out of darkness. In 1932, amid streets filled with unemployment and despair, he became president. From March 4, 1933 to April 12, 1945, Roosevelt served as President of the United States, the only president elected for times in 1932, 1936, 1940, and 1944. A Democrat, he was the 32nd President of America, and in 1943 became the first U.S. President to travel by airplane to attend the Casablanca Conference. By the early 1930s, America was drowning in despair. Factories silent, streets lined with endless queues. Unemployment soaring to an unprecedented 25%. Deflation, falling prices signaled an economy gasping for breath. The population, about 125 million, looked to the future with anxious hope. Roosevelt entered with the New Deal, an architect of hope. Dams and roads were built, libraries and art projects flourished. And for the first time, government directly shaped the economic lives of its people. Charts show GDP rising from $877 billion in 1933 to over $1,195 billion in 1936. A steady climb from the ashes of depression. The path was not easy. In 1938, the economy faltered again. Unemployment rose back to 19%, and deflation cast its shadow once more. Yet the population kept growing, 128 million by decade's end, a testament to society's endurance. Then came World War II. Factories roared back to life, this time producing tanks and planes. Military spending leapt from billions to tens of billions, and the American economy surged at unprecedented speed. GDP rose from $1,681 billion in 1941 to more than $2,524 billion in 1944. Towering columns on the charts, like monuments of steel. Unemployment, that heavy shadow, collapsed during the war, from 9.9% in 1941 to less than 2% in 1944. Nearly the entire workforce engaged in the war effort. Women entered factories, the "We Can Do It" posters adorned the walls, and society was transformed. Inflation surged above 10%, a sign of mounting costs and the economy's racing pulse. Yet the government, through rationing and price controls, sought to keep daily life stable. Meanwhile, the population grew from 132 million in the early 1940s to 139 million by war's end. In his first inaugural address, Roosevelt declared, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." His words cut through silence like light in darkness. Through the New Deal, banks regained trust. Farmers returned to their fields, workers to their factories. Families gathered by the fire at night, listening to their president's voice on the radio, explaining crises, calming hearts. Yet shadows remained. Roosevelt tried to reshape the Supreme Court with new judges, a move known as court packing, seen by many as a grasp for power. He ordered the internment of over 100,000 Japanese Americans, a dark stain on America's human rights record. To preserve Southern support, he avoided anti-lynching laws, a silence that left many lives in peril. And as reports of the Holocaust emerged, his response was limited. History still asks why he did not do more. The world burned in war. At first, Roosevelt kept America neutral. But after Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor, history turned. In December 1941, he stood before Congress and declared, "Yesterday, December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy." His words rang like a bell, summoning a nation to arms.
There is no blinking at the fact that our people, our territory, and our interests are in grave danger. With confidence in our armed forces, with the unbounding determination of our people, we will gain the inevitable triumph, so help us God. I ask that the Congress declare that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
Churchill and Stalin drew maps of war and lifted America from isolation to global leadership. In April 1945, just before the war's end, Roosevelt suffered a fatal stroke at Warm Springs, Georgia. He collapsed while sitting for a portrait and never regained consciousness. The unfinished painting remains, a symbol of his sudden departure. At his side was Lucy Mercer, his secret love. A revelation that shocked his family after his death. Eleanor, despite years of emotional distance, remained in the public eye as a strong First Lady, later becoming one of the most influential women of the 20th century. His children each followed different paths. Anna, his eldest daughter, was his closest companion, even serving as hostess of the White House in his final years. James, Elliot, Franklin Jr., and John entered politics or business, but none reached their father's fame. The Roosevelt family lived under the heavy shadow of his name. After Roosevelt's death, Vice President Harry Truman assumed the presidency. He made a decision that shook the world: the use of atomic bombs against Japan. The war ended, but humanity entered a new age, an age overshadowed by nuclear weapons. Roosevelt's legacy endures, a dual inheritance. A man who, with crippled legs, moved a nation. A man who, with words, conquered fear and revived hope. A man who reshaped America and the world. He laid the foundations of the modern welfare state, lifted the nation from the Great Depression, and led it to victory in World War II. Yet alongside this bright legacy lie shadows: court packing, internment camps, silence on lynching, and insufficient response to the Holocaust. They remind us that even the greatest leaders are human, with flaws and failures. Franklin Roosevelt stood as a hero on history's stage. A hero with paralyzed legs but iron will, a voice that calmed millions. Decisions that saved a nation and changed the world. But he too carried shadows, choices now seen as mistakes. His story is that of a man who lived between light and darkness. A man both inspiring and controversial, and perhaps it is these contradictions that make him one of history's unforgettable figures.